the Asia Pacific Business Forum podcast, exploring business, policy, and personalities across the region.
Okay, hello. I'm Dick Drobnik, and I'm the host of this podcast conversation with Dr. Chung-in Moon, who is a distinguished professor at Yonsei University in Seoul and is the editor-in-chief of an important quarterly journal, Global Asia. He's been a strategic advisor to many presidents of South Korea, was one of the architects of South Korea's sunshine policy of engagement with North Korea, and along with me is a member of the board of the Pacific Century Institute. It's a Los Angeles-based NGO that is dedicated to building bridges between America and the nations of Asia. Chung-in, thank you for making time to have this conversation.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
We're happy to have you, especially in these turbulent times that America is initiating some change in the world. And I was wondering if we could start out by asking you to talk about how you think South Korea might respond to the new Trump administration reciprocal tariff policies of 25% on top of 10%.
It's quite stunning to South Korea. South Korea has, FTA, free trade arrangement with the United States. Therefore, U.S. allocate FTA is still valid, but President Trump's decision is virtually invalidated that bilateral FTA. Therefore, a lot of Koreans are really stunned by President Trump's decision. Okay. And President Trump has virtually ignored the World Trade, organizations, overrules, principles, norms, and procedures. Therefore, we are very much concerned. Yesterday, our acting president Han Duck-soo had a 25-minute talk with President Trump, and President Trump, wrote a very interesting message on X, saying that I had a wonderful talk with the South Korean acting president, and South Korean acting president is kind of agreed to have some kind of one-stop shopping. That means what? In return for American reduction of tariffs in South Korea might be, interested in pushing for the ideas for such as removing non-tariff barriers and also importing American LNG
from Alaska.
And South Korea also participating in Alaska gas pipeline development project. And also South Korea maybe, coming up with a joint cooperation with U.S. on shipbuilding, particularly naval shipbuilding. And at the same time, he made it very clear that the South Korea should increase its defense cost sharing. Okay, therefore, he wanted to have a one-shot deal with South Korea. But the acting president Han Duck-soo, he's acting president, he has only 2 months remain. We'll be having presidential election on June 3rd. Therefore, I don't know what kinds of action he'll be taking it, but it will be a big issue in South Korea. Okay, he might be wanted to have some kind of deal with President Trump, but particular opposition party will be very strongly opposed to that idea. You are acting president. You cannot make any big decision, particularly all those American demands, okay, cannot be done without full consultation with the National Assembly and also South Korean public too. Therefore, it will be posing some kinds of political dilemma to our acting president.
So if South Korea does not quickly provide some benefits to President Trump, it seems like President Trump is going to impose these onerous tariffs on our treaty ally South Korea and our Korea-U.S. FTA partner, and this is going to create some problems, of course, for Korean exports, at least in the short term, until a new Korean president is selected who has the perhaps ability to negotiate.
Anyhow, as President Trump pointed out, South Korea enjoyed about $60 billion trade surplus with the United States. but it's also commodity trade. But if you include the service sector, it's almost in a balanced between the U.S. and South Korea. But President Trump is just looking at commodity trade. That is one big issue. But there is an ongoing internal debate in South Korea how to deal with this American tariff pressures. Therefore, one way is let us comply with President Trump's demand, but that will be too costly, and a lot of South Koreans will be opposing it. Therefore, some people arguing that we should find out the ways for diversification. Therefore, for example, China, Japan, South Korea have been talking about trilateral FTA for the past, 15 years. We had 16 rounds of negotiations, but since 2019, we didn't make any progress. But as a result of American pressure, now this trilateral cooperation is pitching up. Okay, and the trade ministers of three countries get together last week, and now we have been arguing that let us enhance open regionalism among three countries in the Northeast Asia. There are sorts of voices that we should cooperate with the European Union, China, and other countries to revive World Trade Organization. But luckily, our dependence in U.S. has fundamentally curtailed. Now, United States accounts for 16% of South Korea's total export. Okay. For example, look at China. China used to rely on the American market about up to 25%. Now it went down to 13%. Therefore, if America put that kinds of bilateral, tariff pressures, therefore South Korea and all the Asian trading partners will try to diversify.
Yeah, many people are talking about that one response to these kind of unilateral moves by the United States is for everyone to reduce their dependence on the U.S. market, which has been going down, as you point out, in the past few years. This president of the Chinese Research Institute has recently written in the South China Morning Post about the trilateral foreign minister meeting in Tokyo a few weeks ago of Japan, Korea, and China. And he says the outcome of this meeting, the bilateral partnership of China, Japan, and South Korea, is Asia's backbone. In a fractured world, it's our lifeline. Trade supply chains and cultural bonds trump differences. The consensus points reached in Tokyo prove pragmatism works. Let's harness our strengths and shape an Asian century now. Is that an idea that resonates with South Korean conservatives?
But one thing is very clear. If we suffer from American imposition of tariffs, then Seoul, Tokyo, and Beijing are likely to enhance their cooperation. We cannot deny it, okay? Because Korea, Japan, China markets are huge, and the trilateral cooperation can be used as a kind of cushion against American trade pressure. Therefore, in other words, the President Trump is pushing countries in Northeast Asia away from the U.S. and making them cooperate each other. That is very ironical.
Changing the subject a little bit from trade policy, can you imagine a situation or a scenario in which there might be a summit between President Trump and President Kim of North Korea in this current environment?
I think that's possible, but it depends on two important events. One is the progress for progressive for ceasefire in Ukraine. Therefore, Trump-Putin cooperation will be a very important point. If Trump is succeeded in really ending the war in Ukraine, then Kim Jong-un may try to count on President Trump and may return to dialogue. Another important one is U.S.-Iran talk. If the Special Envoy Witkoff come up with a major breakthrough with Iran, if those two things happen, then Kim Jong-un may return to the dialogue with the United States. Otherwise, it might be very, very difficult because Kim Jong-un will be very hesitant to return to dialogue with President Trump. because he has a very bitter feeling of betrayal by President Trump in Hanoi in February 2019.
What would make President Kim Jong-un feel confident that he wouldn't be embarrassed again in a third meeting with President Trump, demanding total disarmament and inspections and so on and so forth?
But since Hanoi setback in 2019, Kim Jong-un seems to have a fundamental distrust of democratic regimes. Okay, change of government every 4 years, 5 years, change everything. Therefore, if you read the recent, editorials and government statement from North Korea, including Kim Jong-un, he has a fundamental skepticism of, democratic regimes. There is no continuity of policy. Even if Kim Jong-un makes a deal with the Trump administration, if America has a new government, the new government can scrap it. Same thing happened for South Korea. And also he has a fundamental suspicion that the United States, South Korea, so-called democratic countries, they have intention to overthrow North Korean regime, okay? And they want to have a so-called democratic capitalist regime in North Korea. Because of those factors, the Kim Jong-un might be very hesitant. However, Kim Jong-un may return to the dialogue with President Trump if President Trump can come up with, suspension of ROKS joint military exercise and training, suspension of American deployment of strategic weapons, and also President Trump's personal commitment to relax sanctions against North Korea, and President Trump's personal commitment to normalize diplomatic ties with North Korea. If President Trump can come up with those kinds of items, and perhaps including, as a sample case, model case, he may propose a joint development of one tourist area through the foreign direct investment, then maybe, Kim Jong-un may come out. Of course, Trump would be wanting North Korea to stop all the nuclear and missile activities. And also in the process of give and take, Trump is very tough bargainer. Therefore, he will be demanding rollback or reduction of North Korean nuclear arsenals and missiles. But as for the complete and verifiable dismantling of North Korean nuclear facilities, materials, and weapons, it will take a longer time. And President Trump knows of it very clearly, that it will take a longer time. But other than that, if North Korea suspend all these nuclear and missile activities and reduce, its weapons and nuclear materials in verifiable manner, that is doable. Therefore, in Hanoi, North Korean leader proposed that we will get rid of all the nuclear facilities in Yongbyon. That was a big deal. But Trump was not happy. Plus, you should get rid of two hidden highly enriched uranium facilities in Gangsan and etc. Of course, Kim Jong-un said no, but after Trump left Hanoi, North Korean foreign minister said, we are willing to negotiate on that too. Therefore, that might be the good starting point.
Back then, John Bolton wanted everything immediately. Right?
Yeah, therefore there was, at that time, Steve Biegun, then Deputy Secretary of State, and his team come up with some kinds of so-called middle-range deal, And then John Bolton was not happy, and then he persuaded President Trump to propose so-called big deal. That means what? North Korea, you get rid of nuclear, missile, biochemical weapons completely, then we'll promise the bright future of your economy. Kim Jong-un didn't take it. That was a big deal. Therefore, at the time, North Korea came up with a small deal or some deal, dismantling of nuclear facilities in Yongbyon, complete dismantling of nuclear facilities in Yongbyon in return for partial relaxation of sanctions. That is what I called a small deal.
Yeah.
But President Trump came up with a big deal saying that you get rid of all those things, then we'll promise the bright future of your economy. There's no reason to Kim Jong-un accept it. And then Trump went back to Washington with no deal. Therefore, Kim Jong-un's a small deal, Trump's a big deal, engineered by John Bolton, and Trump went back to Washington with no deal.
So what could make it different now? Because you said at the beginning, if Trump helps Putin somehow make a peace that doesn't make Putin an international outlaw, and if Trump somehow makes a renewal of the Iranian deal, somehow those two things would give Kim Jong-un confidence to enter into a new set of discussions?
I think so. And particularly if Trump, is successful in settling the Russian-Ukraine war, okay, and then Trump's relations with Putin will be much closer.
Okay, so that's the key, the Putin through Moscow to Pyongyang.
Yeah, because right now, Russia is the most trusted ally of North Korea. And given current behavior of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, there is only one leader whom Kim Jong-un trusts, that is Vladimir Putin.
Okay, and maybe Putin could promise Kim Jong-un that President Trump will behave in a reasonable manner in their discussions.
I think so. But if Trump is succeeded in settling the war in Ukraine as well as Iranian nuclear in a case, then U.S. will be making some concessions too, right? Therefore, Kim Jong-un will carefully scrutinizing what kinds of concessions the U.S. give to both Iran and Russia, and that will be the very important barometer with which Kim Jong-un will make a decision whether to return to dialogue or not.
Okay, so if that positive path happens, then what are the conditions that are necessary for a North Korea-South Korea détente or re-engagement?
But that's a separate, story, because since December 2023, Kim Jong-un has declared that North-South Korea relations is no longer a special relationship based on one nation, one people.
Reunification is no longer a goal.
Oh yeah, the unification is no longer. Therefore, what he said was this: North South Korea were two different people, two different hostile states. Okay, and also following that decision, he got rid of all these government and party agencies that deal with the South Korean affairs. Therefore, now North Korea calls South Korea as the Republic of Korea. And they insist that South Korea should call North Korea as a DPRK, Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Therefore, now hope, then that means what? North Korea is very worrisome that the South Korean intention is to invade North Korea, shake the regime and, collapse the regime and take it over, while unification through absorption. Therefore, what Kim Jong-un is saying is this: okay, we are two separate states. South Korea, you abide by international law and norms. The most important international norm is what? Non-interference with domestic affairs, respect of mutual sovereignty and territoriality. Okay, that is what Kim Jong-un is saying. Therefore, how can we reactivate the inter-Korean relations? And I think to accommodate North Korean demand, then we should deliberate on the constitutional amendment. Article 3 of our Constitution stipulates that the territory of the Republic of Korea is entire Korean peninsula and its adjunct islands. Therefore, North Korea is part of Republic of Korea territory. The current North Korean regime is anti-state regime. Therefore, North Korea is arguing is to get rid of that, Article 3. Article 4 of the Constitution stipulate that the Republic of Korea strive toward peaceful and democratic unification of the Korean Peninsula. That means what? That means in South Korean terms, there might be some kinds of, amendment on that Article 2. Therefore, if the new South Korean leader come up with that kinds of debate, then North Korea may open up. But otherwise, North Korea will not come back to South Korea.
So you're saying that South Korea then has to modify its constitution to take out these ideas of reunification or absorption for North and South Korea to deal with each other as independent countries.
Precisely. Then in the past, the North Korea used to have so-called the Department of United Front of Korea Workers' Party. Yeah. That handled inter-Korean relations. Okay, but now North Korea Ministry of Foreign Affairs deals with inter-Korean affairs. Therefore, North Korea began to treat South Korea as a separate sovereign entity. Mm-hmm. So, no unification, no special relationship. Let us treat each other as a separate state.
So this happened 18 months ago or 20 months ago, the change from North Korea. Has the South Korean body politic absorbed this idea that we should give up on reunification and we should operate as two independent states and negotiate as two independent countries?
That is a fundamental dilemma imposed on Korean political leaders. Most South Koreans would say that, okay, we want peace, forget about unification. However, unification has become socialized in Korean society. Nobody cannot say that, oh, we don't want unification. Let us live peacefully even under the division. No political leaders can speak it out. Therefore, it will be very interesting to observe what had happened during the presidential election campaign, because that issue will come out. Okay, but for me, I think we need to be very pragmatic. Okay, we cannot have a unification without consent of North Koreans. North Koreans are saying that we don't want unification. Then we got to take into account in our deliberation on inter-Korean relations. But that would be a big political issue. But now problem is conservative, they want the unification through absorption. Progressive, they want the unification through mutual consensus. The unification is goal. But Kim Jong-un is saying that we don't want unification. Then what should you do? Then maybe we should go back to President Kim Dae-jung approach, sunshine approach. Okay, first stage, exchange and cooperation, peaceful coexistence. Second stage, creation of union of state between the North and the South, like a European Union. Two sovereign state, institutionalized cooperation and integration. Final stage, when North and South Korea become more harmonized, then we can call for a national referendum. Let people decide on the form of unification, even perpetual division. Okay, that is President Kim Dae-jung's proposal, and that proposal makes sense. Therefore, South Korea since 1989, we have been, striving toward the idea of two states, but North Korea opposed it. North Korea wanted to have either federation, unification based on federation or confederation. But now Kim Jong-un completely changed that approach.
Okay, well, let's close off our conversation on some thoughts of positive movement forward. And it sounds like positive movement forward is that President Trump and President Kim have some kind of positive meeting that reduces North Korea's threat to the United States by reducing testing of missiles and so on and so forth, and reduces sanctions and opens up some trade and investment opportunities, and that maybe there's some way of freezing these non-sanctions so that South Korean investors might take the risk to go north again. And that requires a lot of very skilled, probably patient diplomacy. And hopefully you'll be contributing to that diplomacy.
I hope so. But it's more courage and resoluteness than the skilled diplomacy. Therefore, if President Trump is really committed to peace and denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula, I think he can deliver it. Now he's in the process of destroying the deep state in the U.S. That being the case, he might be able to do that. But again, as I pointed out, let us wait and see what will happen in Ukraine, what will happen in Iran. If those two negotiations turned out to be successful, then we'll have a very, very encouraging news for North Korea.
Then we need you, Chung-in, to be a very young man and a very energetic man to help this process along.
I hope so.
Okay. Thank you very much for this conversation. It was educational and enlightening to me about the complexities that face all of us ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Hosted by Dick Drobnik, the Asia Pacific Business Forum podcast is produced